Alright guys, so I imported a couple of scripts, which is the interaction system as well as the raycast data script. Both of these scripts are from the lesson that I did previously. If you go to my channel, you can find the lesson which is called how to create the interaction system in Unity. Alright, so let's open this interaction system script because we will need to update this script just a tiny bit. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the update method and we need to create a brand new if statement, and if we pressed the key, which is going to be, for example, keycode.e. So if we pressed this key, then we are going to interact with the current hit that we have. So if we press this key, then we are simply going to interact with the object that we are currently interacting. So to do that, let's first of all go back to Unity. Let's create a brand new C# script, which we can call something like interfaces. Alright, let's open this script up, and this script will not need any of this. The only thing that this script is going to contain is the interactable interface. So let's simply say public interface. Let's call this something like interactable, and inside of this interface we are going to have a single method which is going to be called interact. Alright, so this is all we need to do with this interface. Let's go back now to the interaction system, and what we need to do is we need to check if we currently have interacted with an object. If that's the case, then we need to create a brand new variable which we can call something like component, and what we need to get is we need to get the interactable component. We need to try to get the interactable component from the current interacted game object. So we need to say data.hitTransform.getComponent, and the component that we want to get is going to be interactable. So afterwards we need to check if the component is not equals to null. If that's the case, the only thing that we need to do is simply say component.interact. Alright, so that is all we need to do with our interaction system. Let's select our first person controller, and let's attach this interaction system onto this game object, or we can actually attach this interaction system onto the first person character. And what do we need is we need first of all the raycast data. So let's simply go and let's create a brand new raycast data. Alright, so let's go back to our interaction system and let's drag and drop the raycast data. And the next thing is we need the view camera, which is going to be the first person character. And the interaction system, we can make something like do, and layers to interact are going to be interactable. So if you don't have this layer, then you have to press on this drop down, press on the add layer, and simply just add the interactable layer. Alright, and afterwards what we need to do is we need to go and we need to create a brand new script which is going to be a node pickup. So we are going to create this very basic and quick script to simply pick up the node and view it after we pick it. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to implement the interactable interface. Afterwards we need to of course implement the interact method. So let's simply say public void interact, and that is all we need to do. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to implement a couple of variables. The first one is of course the node that we want to pick up. So let's create a brand new serialized field which is going to be the node, And the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a couple of parameters which will determine on the behavior after we interacted with this node. So let's create a brand new serialized field, which is going to be a boolean, and this is going to be called something like auto display. And the next one is going to be also a boolean, and we can call this something like add. Alright, so after we implemented all of these variables, the only thing that we need to do is inside of the interact method, let's simply say if auto display is equals to true, then let's simply say node system dot display, and then let's simply pass in the node that we want to display. Alright, so the last thing that we want to do is we want to check if we want to add this node. So if we want to add this node to the list, let's simply say node system dot add node, and let's simply add the node. So what we need to send in as a parameter is the key and the node. So the key is going to be the node dot label, and the node is going to be, of course, just the node. And the very last thing that we want to do is simply destroy this game object. And that is all we need to do. So let's go back to Unity. So now let's select all of the nodes that we want to pick up. So I created a couple of game objects, as you can see here. And these game objects are going to be our node pickup objects. So let's simply select all of these 4 nodes. And let's add the node pickup script onto these game objects. Of course, now we need to reference the node itself. Alright, so we need to create a couple of nodes so that we can actually pick up these nodes. So let's simply go to the nodes folder and let's create a brand new node. Alright, so let's call this something like test node 1. And this node requires the label. So let's simply say test node 1. And it also requires a couple of pages. So let's create, for example, 2 pages. So now let's go back to the pages and let's create a couple of pages. So the first one we can say node 1 page 1, and let's duplicate that and let's simply say that this is going to be a node 1 page 2. So let's leave the type as text, and for the text let's simply put something like random text. Alright, so we want to display the lines, we don't want to use the subscript, and of course, considering that this is a text-based page, the subscript is not really going to matter that much. Either we leave it as using subscript or not, it doesn't really matter. Of course, once we actually going to import the editor scripts, everything is going to look much organized and better. But for now, let's simply don't worry about this. We are not going to use any narration. Now let's go back to the page 2 and let's simply add some random text to that page as well. Alright, so let's go back to the node and let's simply reference both of these pages. Alright, so let's go back to the node pickup, and this is the node that we are going to pick up. So let's simply reference this node, and that is all we need to do. So now I'm simply going to create a couple of other nodes. Right, so let's create a brand new node. This is going to be the test node 2, and for this node we need a couple of things. So first of all, the label, let's leave it to node 2. Let's create a single page, and this page is going to be, for example, something like node 2 page, and this can be a texture node. The texture that we are going to use is going to be, for example, this texture, and these textures are simply just an example textures that I created. Of course, you can create any textures you want, which is for your node, but I simply going to add some subscript. And of course, this is not a subscript, simply just some random text just to see if this is actually working. So we want to use a subscript. The display lines doesn't really matter. So let's make this page to use the narration, and the narration that we want to use is going to be this random narration that I found on the internet. It's completely out of context, but we simply want to test if this narration is actually going to play or not. So let's simply reference that, and we don't want to play this once, and let's simply uncheck that, and that is all we need to do. So now let's go back to the second pickup, and let's reference the second note. And let's also check the auto display so that every time we're going to pick up this note, it's going to automatically display after we picked this note. Alright, so I created a couple of other example notes for this note and this note. And what we can actually do now is we can jump into play mode, and we can try to playtest this entire thing. Alright, so let's go into this towards this note, and we can now press E to interact. And as you can see, I picked this note, and now if I press tab, I have this example note added to my notes list. Alright, so let's pick other notes, for example this note, this note. Alright, so as you can see, now I have multiple notes added to my inventory. And if I, for example, pick this note, we get an error. Alright, so let's see what that error is. Alright, so apparently I forgot to reference the page of this note. So let's simply go to pages, and let's reference the note 2 page. And now I believe everything should work as it should. So let's jump into the play mode, and let's try to play test this game again. Alright, so apparently we have a couple of issues. So the issue is that we haven't actually disabled the controls when we automatically displaying the note after we picked it. So let's simply go back to the script, and every single time we are calling, we are displaying the note, we are calling this display note method. Alright, and we are only disabling the controls whenever we are opening the notes system, which is right here. So what we need to do is we need to first of all create a brand new private method, and this is going to be something like switch game control. And what we are going to do is we are simply going to pass in the Boolean state, and we are going to then do a switch statement. So if the state is true, then we are simply going to enable all of the controls, which is going to be like this. And if the state is false, then we're simply going to disable all of the controls. So let's simply go back to the open method, and let's call this switch game controls method. Of course, we want to disable all of the controls, so let's simply put in false as the state. And whenever we are closing the notes system, let's simply pass in true to turn on all of the controls. And what we also need to do is we need to go back to the display note method, and what we need to do is we simply need to call this switch game controls method right here. Of course, like I mentioned before, this is a really cheap and quick way of disabling game control. Of course, if you are creating a proper game, you should also implement a proper game manager and kind of do all of these functionality like disabling game control and stuff like that in there. This is just a really quick way for us to test this notes system. So I think that we are pretty much done. So let's simply go back to Unity, which is fine. So let's go and let's pick this note. And as you can see, everything is working just like it should. Right, so let's pick other notes, for example this one, and this one, and the last one. And now as you can see, we have picked 4 notes. So for example, if I try to display this note, and of course we cannot actually do that because we haven't actually implemented on click event. So what we need to do is we need to first of all exit the play mode, we need to go to the prefabs. Then we need to open this prefab. And what we need to do is we simply need to press and add on click event. Let's then drag and drop the node data script. And what we need to do is we simply need to press and select the display method. So whenever we are going to press onto this list element, we are going to display this particular node. All right, so apparently we haven't actually implemented this method yet. So what we need to do is we of course need to update this script. And the only thing that we need to do inside of this method is simply say node system dot display. And what we want to display is of course this node. So let's go back to play mode. All right, so if I'm going to try to, for example, display this node, all right, so it is displaying, but at the moment we have this one tiny issue is that we haven't actually set the order of the canvas. So let's go back here, and the node canvas needs to be in a higher order as the list canvas. And that is all we need to do. And now as you can see, we can go through pages. We can also read the subscript. Alright, so we have one tiny issue, one tiny bug. So we're going to fix that in just a moment. But in general, as you can see, everything seems to work just fine. So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that whenever we are pressing the closed button, we are closing the entire nodes system. But what we actually need to do is we only need to close the actual node. We don't want to close the entire nodes system. So what we need to do is we need, first of all, let's exit the play mode. And after we exit the play mode, let's don't forget to change the node canvas sort order to be 1, which is the higher order than the list canvas, which is 0. And what we need to do is we need to first of all locate the close button. And what we need to do is we need to call, instead of the node system.close method, we need to call the node system.close node method. So this is the method that we need to call. So let's simply go back to play mode. Let's pick up a couple of nodes. Alright, so now if I'm going to, for example, try to display this node and then close it, as you can see, everything is now working as it should. Alright, so we have other issue. As you can see, I have closed the node, but I still cannot move my character because we are only updating the game control whenever we are closing the node system. And we are not actually closing the node system, we are closing only the node. Alright, so what we need to do is, first of all, we need to, instead of switching game control on close, what we need to do is we need to go back to the method which is called onNodeClose. And inside of this method, what we need to do is we need to check if we are not using the nodes system, and then we simply want to close and switch the game controls. So we are only going to switch the game controls if we are no longer using the nodes system. Alright, so let's go back to Unity. Alright, so let's go and let's pick up this node. And if I'm going to close this node, and now as you can see, everything is working perfectly. Alright, so we are done with our nodes system. So what we are going to do now is we are going to import a couple of editor scripts. We are not going to write all of those scripts by hand, but if you want to get those scripts, you can get all of the source files from the description. So let's create a brand new editor folder. And inside of this folder, I'm going to import a couple of editor scripts. Alright, so I imported a couple of editor scripts. As you can see, there's a node editor, page editor, as well as the utility class. So now if you're going to, for example, select the node, this is how the node actually looks like, which is much better. We can now view all of the pages by pressing the view button. And if you, for example, press the insert new button, we are going to create a brand new page and we are going to insert that page at the bottom of the array. Alright, so this is how it looks like. So we are pretty much done with our system. Again, if you want to get all of the source files, all of the assets like textures, all of the editor scripts and stuff like that, you can go into the description and you can find the link to my Patreon where you can actually go and you can unlock all of the source files there. Alright, so we are done with this mini series, and if you have any trouble, please join the Discord server and you can post your issue in one of the help center channels. But nevertheless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.